has to go to the individual states for them to have conventions where they will vote on it, whether yay or nay, whether they accept it or not. Now, they have to have a majority in order for the new constitution actually to take effect, all right? And so those who are opposing ratification are the anti-federalists, and those who are for it are the federalists, okay? So. Now, this little charty thing here, which all of you have except one, divides the description here about who are the anti-federalists and who are the federalists. Now, to mention the left-hand side, anti-federalists. Who are the anti-federalists? Let's mention this here. Can someone close the door, please? Caroline, close the door, please. You got the anti-federalists are states' rights advocates. States' rights advocates. And so the anti-federalists are very much focused upon, are concerned about the rights of the states. And then the federalists are focusing more on central government, a strong central government. Also, too, they'll mention here backcountry farmers, poor farmers, the ill-educated and illiterate. Sounds familiar? Debtors. You would all be anti-federalists. Okay, and favor money advocates. Sorry, that was just too easy.
Too easy and probably too funny.
Just hilarious. Okay, so anyway, so on the flip side, they're going to say here the well-educated and property class, and so there's this kind of this accusation that the Federalists are trying to protect their own money, their own power. They're the aristocracy, and you look at again those who are part of the Constitutional Convention. You got the George Washingtons, Thomas Jeffersons, James Madison, and so on. And you could kind of make an argument that these are the most educated men in the land. They do have a lot to lose if they, with anarchy or with the country if it folds. They were the leaders of the revolution, okay? And so they put a lot of themselves into trying to keep this country alive, all right? But the anti-federalists and later critics would just say, well, the founding fathers were just in it for themselves. The only reason they created this document is somehow to maintain their power, right? So you follow me on this, okay? Now, you can say that to prove that, that's a whole nother issue, because again, you would have to say someone benefits unfairly from a new system of government. So, for example, if all the founding fathers became seriously wealthy because of the Constitution, or if they gained more property, or they became, extremely politically powerful or something like that, where they abused that power, you could say, yeah, these guys just arranged all this to their own benefit, but you can't prove that at all. Okay? Yes? Okay. So let's take a look-see at the ratification the positions. Okay, and so these are the two sides, and it's hopefully, if you think about this before, is that when you have two sides, again, one side, one side, it's the opposite of that side. So a lot of times you get stuck. You can go, well, what's the opposite of this? All right. So number one, for the anti-federalists, the Articles of Confederation were a good plan. Okay. Well, so obviously on the Federalist side, the Articles of Confederation were weak and ineffective. They weren't a good plan. That's why they had to create a constitution. Number two, for the anti-federalists, oppose strong central government. Okay, and that includes oppose a standing army. Okay, because again, the anti-federalists are reacting to the American Revolution. They don't like standing armies, because they would say, why do we need a standing army? It's expensive, and also too, the fear is that whoever's in power would use that military to oppress the people, control the people, that kind of thing, all right? And they also, the anti-federalists opposed a 10-mile square federal stronghold, and that's basically going to be later on DC, okay? So they don't want a capital city, basically, okay? They want to keep it simple, they want to keep it, the central government weak, that kind of thing. Now on the flip side of that, you have on the federal side, number two, national government needs to be strong in order to function. Powers and foreign policy need to be strengthened while accesses to home need to be controlled. Okay? Kelly, you looking at this paper that I'm holding here? You might want to follow along here to join the party. Yeah. Because you have to know all this for the quiz and the test. Number three, for the anti-federalists, strong national government threatens state power. And this is going to be an ongoing debate, constantly. Because again, you're going to have, it's one thing if the state governments and the federal government agree on everything, okay, but the problem's going to be is that you're gonna have issues, and for example, this is just an easy one about slavery. You're gonna have, again, the federal government, this, at one point opposed to slavery, and then you have states that basically want to protect slavery. And the question is, who's gonna win? Who's gonna win? That eventually results in civil war, right? So states' rights, even today, for example, the whole thing over homosexuality, transgender transgender stuff, again, the federal government's been kind of endorsing and pushing that, and states who are more conservative saying we don't want that garbage, we oppose that for various reasons, and we're standing against it. And so the question is, who has final say? So now drugs, since you guys are mostly on that, is that the drugs are like marijuana or Mary Jane, or is that you have the federal government that's outlawed. It's basically still an illegal substance, and yet certain states have legalized that. And so it's caused a conflict again with who has the final say. The states, they have final say over this, or the federal government have final say over this. And so we have these ongoing issues still, right? Okay, going back on the right-hand side for number 3, we already talked about strong national government needed to control uncooperative states. And that control thing is kind of what's the boogeyman here, okay? The boogeyman. Baba Yaga, okay, is
Baba Yaga. Boogeyman.
It's
Russia?
No.
Russian for boogeyman.
Yeah, it sounds familiar to you, doesn't it? All right, so yeah.
The witch lady in the
It's
house.
okay, anyway, so the point being is that, again, strong national governments need, uncooperative would be, what do you mean by that? Okay, and so again, a lot of times you're going to have uncooperative states because you always have Rhode Island, they're always a stick in the mud. You always have people like North Carolina, they're worst, okay? And so, what do you do when you have states that won't play ball? Number 4, a strong national government threatened the rights of the common people. So Constitution was created by aristocratic elements suspecting a sinister plot to suppress the liberty of the masses. Okay? So this again has some legitimacy to it. Okay, is that in the history of world history and with England, they had rights under Magna Carta. That's part of that tradition, and yet you had the King of England arbitrarily, taking rights, giving rights, reinterpreting rights, and so on and so forth. And so the whole thing about freedom and liberty is really super important to the founding of our country. And there's this whole process. And so with states, you have this local government where those rights can be watched, those rights can be protected. If there's some kind of violation of those rights, you can directly address it very, very quickly. Under a huge national government, those rights can be changed, and it's very, very difficult to try to address that or to try to deal with that. And this is what on the flip side of that, it's that strong national government needed to I'm sorry, that was number 3. No, that was number 4. Sorry, excuse me. Men of experience and talent should govern the nation. So here's another little bit of controversial thing. The founding fathers really believed you want the brightest and the best to run the country. Okay, and that smacks of elitism, okay? But what's the opposite? Yeah, we really want old men who are senile running the country. We want people who are stupid, okay, or who are somehow unqualified morally to run the country, okay? That's kind of where we're at right now. Is it's democracy at its worst, So the founding fathers would say again is that you want good leaders. You want people who are educated. You want people who understand what it means to be a civil servant and so on. And the idea underneath that is mobocracy. That's actually a technical term. Okay, is that this is the flaw of democracies. The mob can be controlled, the mob can be manipulated, the mob can be just outright wrong, okay? And so you have to be careful again, is that when the people, and we've seen this again with Black Lives Matter, right? We've seen this with woke protests and things like that. Even today with the thing with Israel and Gaza, a lot of the protests on college campuses, gentlemen, you really need to be paying attention to this. I'm really concerned about you. Is that they have these protests, which are really the mob. In other words, when you listen to what they say and what they do, it makes no sense. They're not rational arguments. They're not debates. They're not some kind of rational forum where you actually can get to the truth of the matter. It's just pretty much just people being just abrasive, loud, angry. They're getting caught up in the emotions of all that, and therefore it doesn't accomplish anything, right? Other than make people feel like they're actually doing something. Number 5, Constitution favored wealthy men and preserved their power. There's that accusation again. Okay, opposed the dropping of annual election representatives. And so again, that's not true. National government would protect the rights of the people. Okay, and so this is when we get to the Bill of Rights. That's definitely going to be addressed there. Number 6, which is a Bill of Rights. Constitution lacked a Bill of Rights. Initially, the original version of that. A Bill of Rights, Hamilton would say we don't need a Bill of Rights. Okay, Alexander Hamilton said the original Constitution didn't need a Bill of Rights because the Constitution limited the power of the government. That if the people would actually obey the Constitution, then the government could not do anything beyond what the Constitution explicitly said. So therefore, rights would not be violated. Okay. The problem is that people don't obey the Constitution and they go beyond the Constitution. Therefore, rights are actually threatened. Okay, because people are sinners. And so, therefore, what will happen, of course, is the federal government will create the Bill of Rights. Okay. You go over to where are we on? Number 6, 5 or 6. 6, Constitution of the United States government, how do I all say? Okay. 6, on the right-hand side for the Federalists, Constitution and state governments protected individual rights without Bill of Rights, so on and so forth. Number 7, argued against two-third ratification plan. Remember, under the Articles of Confederation, in order for it to be amended, every state had one vote and it had to be unanimous. In this case here, it's going to be 2/3 majority. Let's see here. Number 8, oppose omitting any reference to God. Okay, and so that's an interesting point. Is that where's God in the Constitution? When you get into debates with non-Christians, a lot of times about the founding of America, how much influence Christianity had on America, they would say, well, look, even the Constitution doesn't make a reference to God. Okay, now I would make an argument in the preamble that you can see a reference to God, but that doesn't matter because you see God everywhere else. You see him in the Declaration of Independence, you see him in all of the documents. So it's just, if one document is not making explicitly, and the Bill of Rights, freedom of religion, is just insinuated in that. So on the right-hand side, for the federal side, in favor of establishing the Constitution, so on, and then 8, more sympathetic to separation of church and state, especially with the Bill of Rights. All right? Okay, so that's a lot. Okay, and that's my point. There's a lot of information here, and if you're just going to go in cruise control and just phone this in, it's not going to look good. Okay, so let's take a look back on your textbook here too. We're going to kind of run through this fairly quickly, and so here we go. So if you look over, it starts on 173, and then it goes over to page 174. All right. Now, I was going to mention here on the left-hand side that the Anti-Federalist camp had in certain really famous individuals. You do have Samuel Adams, Patrick Henry, and Richard Henry Lee. Okay, and these are guys that pretty much are states' rights advocates, and they'll kind of look upon the new Constitution as kind of being a bully document. Where remember the original intent was to supposedly revise the Articles of Confederation, and when it was all said and done. The founders came with a totally new document. Okay, surprised everybody. And so even that accusation was like, well, we didn't send people to Philadelphia to make a whole new document. We sent you to revise the Articles of Confederation. So this question about legality is a little bit there. So according to the Anti-Federalists, if you go down to the very bottom on the left-hand side, Anti-Federalists voiced vehement objections to the gilded trap known as the Constitution. They cry with much truth that it had been drawn up by the aristocratic elements and hence were anti-democratic. They likewise charged the sovereignty of the states was being submerged and that the freedoms of the individual were being jeopardized by the absence of a Bill of Rights. They decried the dropping of annual elections for congressional representatives. And remember what annual means. Okay, annual means once a year. Okay, under the Constitution, with the House of Representatives, what's their term there, Isaiah? Lower house.
Lower house is lifetime.
No.
2 years.
2 years, yeah.
Upper house.
And you hear the word, again, that's something too about paying attention, is lower house, when you hear the word representatives, that's the lower house. If you hear the word senators, that's the upper house, yeah.
And presidents is for the years.
Right.
But is our test, if it asks a question and we put 10 years?
It's not 10 years.
Put that thing.
Okay, I'm telling you what the truth is, yeah. In fact, even with 10 years now with the amendments, it's been limited now to you only go 2 consecutive terms, that's it. Because later on when we get to FDR, the guy's gonna be running for like forever. He'll go 4 terms and often then dies. And Congress says no more of that 4 terms. That's like 16 years or 15 years, why aren't you doing that? So,
16.
well, he went, yeah, because he was like Depression and then World War II, so he was there a long time. Okay, moving on. And they also mentioned, of course, their opposition to DC, the creation of a standing army, a mission, and so on. So the very bottom on the left-hand side is really kind of important to go back and read that again, right? Because when I definitely will ask you objections by the Anti-Federalists to the Constitution, you need to give me explicit things, not made-up things, not imaginary things, not halfway thought-out things. Now, what happens next is basically the debate, okay? And so this is on the right-hand side, and they'll mention is that, so all these copies of the Constitution go to the states, and then the leaders of the states call a convention together, and then all these different towns and villages basically send representatives to debate this, to read it, discuss it, and then to decide whether they're gonna vote on it, all right? Now, they have a chart on page 175 about how the voting goes. The book's gonna mention here that right off the bat, number 1, Delaware is the first state that accepts the ratification. Now, typically, the small states fall in line really, really quickly. You can see unanimous, okay, is that they are pretty much, if you're a small, if it's a state, anything you get is gonna be good, all right? So you're gonna automatically go, yeah, we want it, okay? But then it'll go Pennsylvania, okay, and then New Jersey, and then you see Georgia. So those small states, again, are going to pretty much just bam, automatically. The one state that everybody's gonna be watching is gonna be Massachusetts. Okay, Massachusetts, of course, is like, besides Virginia, is the big gun. Okay, so, and the book will mention this on the left-hand side again on page 174. And so, it's gonna be fairly contentious. You can see it's 187 to 168, all right? And it's the second in population. And so once it kind of gets over Massachusetts, then everybody's pretty much at that point is going like, oh, this is pretty much a done deal. Because remember, you gotta only have 9 states to actually ratify it. So once you get up to like 8, you're done. I mean, so it's gonna get ratified by one of the other states, okay? So if you're reluctant in your state to ratify it, you're just pretty much like, we gotta do it. You know, it's like everybody else is doing it, we gotta do it too. You can't like be not a part of the United States, okay? So Massachusetts, and of course Maryland, no one cares about Maryland. But it gets there, and so the idea. Now the big thing is going to be one of the common accusations of the Bill of Rights, okay, the Bill of Rights. And so after it's ratified, after it becomes a law of the land, James Madison will create the Bill of Rights. And the Bill of Rights are the first 10 amendments to the U.S. Constitution, okay? The Bill of Rights are extremely, extremely, extremely important. I'm not gonna make you memorize them now, but when you get into government, if you take my government class next year, you need to know that. Because these are the protections we have, the last protections that we have, other than Almighty God, against the government. You know, freedom of religion, kind of important. You know, freedom of press, freedom of speech, free speech, right to assembly, right to petition the government, right to bear arms, due process of the law. When you get them by the popo and they arrest you, you got Miranda rights and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
They can't take them away, right?
Well, the problem is that number 1 is that American citizens are stupid. Okay, that they don't read the Declaration, they don't know the Constitution, they don't know their rights. And so then secondly is that it's just a piece of paper. The minute the government says, we really, yeah, because a lot of countries have like constitutions and they have these rights, like Russia, you know. All these communist countries have these fancy constitutions or dictatorships, and then they don't ever obey them. They don't ever do them. So it's a scam. And so that's the kind of problem is that the minute the government says, we know this is the law of the land, but we're not going to do it, you're in trouble at that point because they have the guns. We have guns, they have guns, you know, someone has guns, everybody has guns, okay, so yeah, so that's a problem, okay, so one of the things that's going to happen is that you're going to have, for the remaining states, is going to, especially New York's another kind of big state with this, is that you're going to have 3 individuals who are going to write what's referred to as the Federalist Papers, okay, Federalist Papers. These are 85 articles or essays written by John Jay, Alexander Hamilton, and James Madison. And what's going to happen is that in the New York newspapers, you have anti-federalists who are writing articles why they oppose the Constitution. And then these three individuals who are like the big dogs of, as far as founding fathers, and they're very intellectual. They're very, Hamilton and Madison especially are extremely intelligent, and they are responding to the arguments of the anti-federalists publicly in these newspapers. And so the collection of these essays are pretty much the commentary on the U.S. Constitution, that if you really study law, study politics, you want to study the debates that are going on at the time period, you read the Federalist Papers, okay? They are authoritative as far as interpretive of the Constitution itself, right? And typically in high school and college, you're required to read at least a couple of the Federalist Papers. And they don't even do that anymore. That's why I make you at least do one.
You said there's 79.
Yeah, there's 206.
Where'd you get some?
There's 85.
It's 85. Yeah, the book actually says 85.
I was like, wait.
I just see if you pay attention. Yeah, all right. Aiden, how many of the Federalist Papers, how many are there?
85.
Okay.
But you just randomly said 206.
I did, yes.
Okay.
Okay. All right, so moving on. So we'll get into the Federalist Papers on Wednesday, okay? All right.
Ooh.
The, of course, the moral of the story is that New York, of course, will be swayed to ratify the Constitution, and it becomes the law of the land, right? So, now, very last section in your textbook on page 178. Now, this section here was actually, in the old versions, was actually in the front of the chapter. I don't know why they moved them around. I think they just wanted to scam everyone, thinking like this is a new textbook. Like nobody would notice. I notice, okay? That it's like this. Yeah, it's like outrage. Okay, so so it goes on here the pursuit of equality. Okay, so they mentioned here is that all men are created equal. We talk about that in the Declaration of Independence and so on. It says most states so. What they're trying to make here is that how is it getting that new idea of equality? How is it getting played out practically in the culture? All right. So the book's going to mention here most states reduced property holding requirements for voting. And we're going to see a whole history with this because this goes back to the Puritans and the whole thing. You had to have church membership in order to vote, and then later on, this democracy is going to start where who can vote. And so originally it's just going to be men with property, and there'll be men with less property, and then any men without any property, and then eventually it'll segue into women eventually will be able to vote, and then anybody can vote, and you guys can vote, and it's scary. And so, yeah, so 18 years old, yes. And so that the lowering the standards is going to be seen as an example of that. Also mentioned here too about titles. We have no aristocracy, so we don't have like sir or like nobility like knights and barons and things like that. But even Mr. and Mrs. They mentioned here is that is changed a little bit, and so don't worry about that. Also the right hand side, kind of skip on over there. About freedom of religion, I've already talked about that a little bit. We'll get more to that a little bit later on, so I'm not going to. The only thing about that is that about we talk about established churches that were supported by tax dollars. Okay, that's being changed now. So again, within these states like Virginia, Massachusetts, and so on, is that now all there is a disconnect between the funds from the state going to the churches. Now the biggie that's going to mention here is going to be about slavery. Okay, so the next paragraph down here, they'll mention in 1775, the world's first anti-slavery society is founded by the Quakers in Philadelphia. Okay, the Quakers are big-time anti-slavery, and by the way, they are a Christian denomination. Okay, in fact, most of the abolitionist groups and individuals who are going to be pushing against slavery are all going to be motivated by Christianity, by the Bible. There's that connection there. Because it's a moral issue. Okay, so make sure you know that. The rest of the textbook's going to make this whole argument about why did it take so long for the Constitution or for the government to start responding to slavery. If you look over on page 179, on the left-hand side, this is the second paragraph. It says, why in this dawning democratic age did abolition not go further and cleanly blot out the evil of slavery from the fresh face of the new nation? The sorry truth is that the fledgling idealism of the founding fathers was sacrificed to political expediency. Now make sure you understand what it means by that. Or what do you think it means by that? Cooper?
I don't know.
You don't know. Well, I want you to actually look in your book right now. Go take a look at your textbook. Don't tell me you don't know. Listen, we're going to take a shot out of here. The sorry truth is that the fledgling idealism of the founding fathers was sacrificed to political expediency. You're 11th grade. You're hoping to go on to college, maybe. Okay, you gotta take a stab at it. All right. We've talked about this. What?
What is expediency?
It means you want to do something quickly. Something's expedient. You want to cut corners.
If they
You want
tried to do that like right off the bat in the Constitution, then people wouldn't accept it, and then they should,
Yeah. Because I've talked about this over and over and over and over and over and over again, right? Is that you have to put yourself at that time period, right? There were tons of people who knew slavery was wrong, okay? It wasn't like nobody knew, all right? The problem, of course, is that at the time, for example, if you go back to the Declaration of Independence, our immediate expedient concern was freedom, right? Independence. And you had to have cooperation with all the 13 colonies, okay? Then if you get to the Constitution itself, same problem, is that you have to have cooperation. And so if you have these some of these states that have slaves, and you say to them, we're gonna just take all your slaves, all right, without them agreeing to that, then they're going to say, you know what, we're not gonna play ball, we're not gonna do this, and the country basically falls apart, right? So, but when you read the writings of the founding fathers, this time period and then later on, they are perplexed by this issue. They're concerned about this issue. They're agonizing over this issue because they know it's a huge issue, but what's the solution? Okay, and it's not just going to be the slaves. The Indians are going to be another big thing. When we get into this whole story about, you know, because it's so easy in our time period to criticize, like, oh, it's a bunch of racists. You know, they're all a bunch of racists, you know, and they all should, you know, blah, blah, blah. Okay, and my whole point is that, well, what would you have done? Okay, so if you have like, you know, 5 to 20 million blacks, you're just going to set them free? Okay, good luck on that. We're going to see what's going to happen after the Civil War, is that causes a huge amount of problems. Okay, because there's a lot to that. Same with the Native Americans, is that why couldn't we just all get along? Okay, well, it's more complicated than that, right? And so these issues about equality and freedom and justice and so on, is that you have to think deeply about these things and understanding the details of these things, because in our time period right now, it's just easier to say all the founding fathers, all the white people were all racist, they all just were all trying to protect their power, it's all about oppression, it's all about victimization, it's all about, you know, pushing people around, blah, 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 blah. And that's a false view of history. It's a very superficial view of history. Okay, so that's what they're kind of going with that there, okay? In fact, even that little quote here from James Madison, Madison says, quote, "Great as the evil of slavery is, a dismemberment of the Union would have been worse." Okay, and so that's true. On the right-hand side, let's talk about the ladies, okay? Because women, again, there's a legitimate thing about, you know, what about women and their rights, okay? And so remember, in a sense, you know, you have to define, what do you mean by that? You know, obviously women could not vote, okay? And you could argue that, you know, whoever's, you know, going back to that time period, there was, again, this view about women that were not true, without a doubt, okay? But this idea of, you know, they had a lot more freedoms compared to, say, like Muslim countries, okay, or something like that. They had this environment where eventually that could progress over a period of time. And the book will mention here on the right-hand side about civic virtue. Civic virtue. Now this is on the right-hand side, and this ties back to republicanism. So when we talk about republicanism, okay? So again, what is civic virtue? Cooper? Because I'm going to pick on you today.
The notion that democracy depended on the unselfish commitment of each citizen to the public good.
Okay, so tell me in your own words, what is civic virtue?
Everyone had to be good.
Everything had to be good. Okay, not bad. Okay, because again, when you don't understand what something means, take the word apart, right? You should know what civic means. You know, okay, civic has to do with something that's public, right? So the citizens, that would be part of that. Okay, and some virtues have to do with morality, right? And so this goes back to the republic, is that the republic's health and its security depends upon the character, essentially, of the people. I've been arguing this over and over and over again. When the people are selfish, when the people are untrustworthy, when the people are narcissistic, when the people are lazy, when the people are, all these other negative things, then don't be surprised the society is a reflection of that. And the government is a reflection of that. And the leaders we choose are a reflection of that, right? Because again, if the people are immoral, then their leadership will also be immoral too, okay? So, now the point in all this, what? No, you cannot. Okay, when the point of all this is it's connected to Republican motherhood, okay? So Republican motherhood is meant to again put a lot of emphasis and importance on the moms, okay, motherhood. So the idea being is that, okay, if we need good citizens, it's not the school's responsibility, it's not my responsibility to do this. In fact, I'm gonna make this argument in my Veterans Day speech, all right, about this, okay? And it's gonna be a doozy, is that it's not my job to teach you how to be good. It's not my job to teach you even to be a good citizen. It's your mama's and your daddy's job to do that, okay? That's the first line of defense. That's the school you're raised in, okay? And so, according to this whole time period, again, that's the idea, is that the home was extremely important and marriage was extremely important, and the role of the mother influencing the children in godliness and in civic virtue, that was their job, that was their responsibility. If they did it well, then they had children that would actually fulfill this. Does that make sense? Yeah, okay. All right, I think, okay, so let's take a look, see over on page 181. Okay, so this you have your dates. I'm just gonna tell you, you need to know all of them for the quiz and the test, so I'll just keep that simple for you. I'm not gonna dance around too much of that. The only thing you probably don't need to know too much about is on the right-hand side for Virginia Statute of Religious Freedom. We'll get, I'm gonna skip that for right now. And that's about it. Okay, also too, I'm sorry, if you look at the very top there on for 1783, the Society of Cincinnati, that's kind of a Mason, kind of a secret society kind of thing. We're not getting them right now. Okay, so yeah, don't worry about them. All right, so besides that, that's, we've completed this section, all right? So now a couple things is that, of course, you have all the information you need to finish the homework, the key terms and study questions, okay? Make sure you do them well, because I'm not gonna check them until the day of the quiz. So if you get them all wrong or you got missing information, that's on you, right? So again, so heads up on that, you got a week to do that. Also to make sure you use this chart on this, okay? Learn it, live it, love it, okay? And make sure you go back and read the textbook, always, okay? Also too, for today's homework, you guys already seen it before, the race to ratification. You're doing that online. If you've never seen it, you get to the end of it, take a screenshot and then send it to me. All right? Now you can use the restroom. Yeah. Mhm. I'm gonna get you this copy. No,
Not
it's not
the
that.
online one, but I already did the forms, because I didn't know which ones you guys did on Friday, so I sent all of the stuff. As one